January 5th, 2026, 6:17 a.m. local time, Southern Caribbean. The USS Gravely's forward gun mount shudders to life as steel ships and crew freeze mid-step because the combat net has just delivered the one phrase nobody wants to hear at sea. Condition 3, man all key stations. Three unidentified surface contacts are closing fast from the southwest, tightening formation as their tracks light up on the tactical screen. Sierra 1, Sierra 2, Sierra 3, flagged as Venezuela. This is not just another tense approach. It is happening in the shadow of a political shock that Caracas is still treating as an open wound. In the past 48 hours, U.S. officials have claimed Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, was captured and flown to the United States, while Venezuelan voices and some international coverage describe it as an abduction after strikes in Caracas. On the bridge, the captain keeps his voice flat because he does not need volume to move a warship. Orders ripple through the decks as magazines unlock, safety's clear, helmets go on, and the Combat Information Center plots a converging approach at 28 knots, bearing 243, closing the gap minute by minute. The Gravely's 5-inch gun rotates only a few degrees, not to fire but to signal posture, while the report comes back with the detail that matters. Low profiles, likely fast patrol boats, running light with no heavy signatures, just speed and intent. For the Venezuelan Navy, this kind of fast closure becomes more than maritime signaling. After the reported capture of Maduro, every contact can be framed at home as resistance, and every step back can be framed as surrender, even if the sea reality is just steel, speed, and distance. That is what makes these moments dangerous. Politics rides on top of navigation decisions measured in yards. The ship's electronic warfare suite hums online as sensors spread across the electromagnetic spectrum, recording every emission and every ping. On deck, sailors stare into a horizon that has not even broken into sunrise yet, tracking motion more than shapes, because these encounters have happened before, but not with Caracas this angry and not this close to the edge of international waters. The operations officer leans into the surface display and calls it clearly. The contacts are inside 12 nautical miles and closing, and hostile intent should be marked pending identification. The captain makes the choice that keeps pressure from turning into a headline. Maintain course, stand ready, hold fire. In the corridors and stations below, the drill becomes real as loaders check feeds, the close-in defenses power up, and the ship's systems come fully awake. Because a fast approach exercise is one thing, and a fast approach with a national flag is something else. The helmsman keeps the destroyer inside international waters by less than 3 miles, knowing a small deviation can be framed as provocation before the next radio call is even logged. This is not happening by accident. For the past 2 months, U.S. destroyers and Coast Guard cutters have been patrolling the Southern Caribbean under Operation Sentinel South, described on paper as maritime security but understood in practice as a message. Washington is watching routes tied to Venezuelan waters. Just 4 days earlier, U.S. Navy helicopters intercepted 2 speedboats suspected of trafficking weapons and narcotics toward Curaçao, and one was sunk after it ignored repeated warnings. A split-screen moment where Caracas called it aggression, and the Pentagon called it law enforcement at sea. Now the Venezuelan Navy is pushing back, testing the narrow line between defense and provocation. The USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, is built for exactly this kind of pressure, with a hull about 155 meters long and a Spy 1D radar that can track over 100 targets, while the Aegis combat system links the ship into a wider network overhead. That power is what makes these moments so dangerous, because one misunderstanding can send the escalation curve straight up with no warning. The approaching patrol craft are likely Guayquerí class, fast and lightly armed, suited for harassment, not built to win a fight, but built to make one possible. Inside U.S. Southern Command, this kind of encounter has a name. Controlled friction, political right up until it is not. On the Gravely, the politics do not matter at 6:17 a.m. because the threat is now less than 10 nautical miles and every system that matters is already alive. Forward, the 5-inch 62 caliber Mark 45 sits in standby. barrel held toward the southwest, capable of firing shells weighing about 70 pounds out past 13 nautical miles with enough precision to reach a moving patrol boat if it ever comes to that. Aft, the Mark 15 Phalanx CIWS, nicknamed Sea Whiz, spins its 6-barrel Gatling gun, built to throw about 4,500 rounds per minute as a last line of defense, the kind of system crews joke about during training and stop joking about when the range collapses. In the Combat Information Center, Aegis fuses radar, sonar, and electronic intercepts into one picture, while the SLQ-32V3 listens passively for the pulse that would indicate targeting radar, and for now it hears nothing, which can be reassuring or ominous depending on what the other side wants. 6:19 a.m. The call goes out to prep the aircraft, and the flight deck crew moves with practiced calm as tie-downs come off and rotor blades fold out on the MH-60R Seahawk, the ship's eyes and early warning combined. The helicopter lifts into the morning haze, call sign Razor 21, with a mission that is simple and delicate. Eyes on, observe, no weapons hot, no move that can be framed as escalation. From altitude, the crew locks onto the patrol boats in thermal and optics, 3 hulls running a loose V formation, wakes cutting white scars through the water. Engines near maximum, details sharp and fast. Flags, sensor masts, individual crew on deck, and a long cylindrical structure behind the lead vessel's bridge that could be navigation, radar, or an optical sensor. No deck-mounted guns are visible, but absence is not proof, and the intent is still written in speed. Razor 21 reports visual confirmation as the Gravely holds steady and the SPY-1D tracks with tight precision, but the ship does not hard lock the contacts, because that single step can turn defensive posture into a provocation claim. The helicopter circles wide instead, a quiet warning that the US Navy has eyes everywhere, even when the sea looks empty. 6:22 a.m. The range compresses to 5 nautical miles, close enough for Venezuelan crews to read the destroyer's markings, and close enough for every sailor aboard to feel the tension crawling up their spine. The bridge transmits first in English, then Spanish. Venezuelan naval vessels. This is a United States warship operating in international waters. You are closing distance at high speed. Alter course immediately. The message hangs over the water. Clean, direct, professional. And then there is only silence. If your radar is still on, hit subscribe, because the next move out here is usually made in silence, not in speeches. 6:34 a.m. The word blockade is now doing more work than any warship on the water. In public, it sounds like a wall. It sounds like a permanent, sweeping shutdown. But at sea, the operational question is narrower and more dangerous. What is the United States actually trying to do in real time, with real hulls, real crews, and cameras ready to frame every second? If this were only about taking oil, it would be a short story. One sanctioned tanker, one boarding, one cargo held. But the leverage is not only in the barrels. The leverage is in the message that the route itself can be interrupted, and that everyone behind the route cannot treat the ocean like a guaranteed pipeline anymore. That is why Caracas does not answer this with paperwork. It answers with escorts, because escorts turn a routine interdiction into a moving political test. And this is where discipline matters more than bravado. The most dangerous part of an intercept is rarely a weapon. It is distance. It is angles. It is a ship edging closer than it needs to, forcing the other side to choose between holding position or yielding and looking weak. A cutter closing the gap can be interpreted as enforcement or intimidation. A naval escort sliding into the lane can be framed as protection or harassment. The physical movements are small, but the narrative consequences are huge. The phrase that keeps coming back in Washington's messaging is simple: the oil that has been seized, we're going to keep it. That line is meant to sound decisive, and it does, but it also creates the next argument instantly. If cargo is seized, what happens next? Is it stored? Is it sold? Is it held as evidence? Does it become a strategic lever? The answer matters because it shapes how the next contact at sea is interpreted. Enforcement has a tight playbook: identify, intercept, board, document, secure, depart. A blockade posture invites escalation because it is not just a stop. It is a stance, and stances create reactions. Venezuela's escorts change the geometry of every future boarding. The escort is not there to win a naval battle. It is there to complicate the moment of contact, to make a routine radio exchange feel like a public contest of will, to create footage that can be replayed later with a caption that locks both sides into a story neither fully controls. That is why timing becomes the center of gravity. Not just whether to intercept, but when. Because sanctioned tankers do not move like normal commercial ships. They use habits that repeat. They linger at predictable points. They rendezvous. They shuffle paperwork where paperwork changes hands quickly. They switch flags. They switch names. They blend into ordinary maritime traffic until the moment someone pulls the thread. That is the shadow fleet problem in plain terms. The ocean is huge, but the patterns repeat, and once a pattern is visible, the intercept can be planned around the pattern rather than around the headline. A disciplined campaign does not chase the most dramatic escort. It waits for the moment with fewer exits, when the tanker has less room to maneuver, when daylight favors safe boarding, when sea state is calmer, when traffic is thinner, when the escort has fewer angles to crowd. That is how pressure is applied without turning enforcement into chaos. Because the real pressure does not stay on the water. When a shipment is delayed, it is money sitting still. It is a payment not made. It is fuel not delivered on schedule. It is contractors waiting. It is internal decisions piling up inside a government already running on narrow margins. That is why every escort matters more than it looks. The escort is a signal to the regime's adakil. We are still in control. But the harder that signal gets, the more fragile the situation becomes at close range. And now the sea becomes a clock. Not a clock to war, but a clock to the next contact, when two vessels share the same water again and everyone understands that one small misread movement can rewrite the entire mission. 7:41 a.m. The story changes the moment the second contact becomes inevitable. The first stop is a message, the next stop is a test. Because once an escort shows up once, it is no longer improvisation, it becomes habit. And habits at sea are where incidents are born. At this point, the question is not whether a cutter can stop a tanker. It is what happens after the first seizure, when another ship tries to sail and another escort appears, believing it has to prove something. The tanker's mission is simple: move cargo. The escort's mission is more subtle: shape the moment of contact without firing a shot. Presence, positioning, pressure. The kind of pressure that forces the other side to either back off or accept a higher risk of something going wrong. This is why rules of engagement become the real center of gravity. Rules of engagement are not just about weapons. They are about thresholds. How close is too close? What counts as interference? What counts as a warning? What counts as a hostile act? On land, people argue over lines on a map. At sea, the line moves with the swell, the wind, and the turning radius of steel hulls. And the cameras are already rolling, ready to replay every maneuver with a caption that can turn routine enforcement into a national crisis. The word blockade keeps amplifying the risk because it activates expectations that the operational reality cannot fully control. Even if the mission is targeted interdiction against sanctioned vessels, the label invites the other side to act like it is already under siege. And once a side believes it is under siege, the instincts change. Escort formations tighten. Radio traffic becomes more rigid. Bridge teams stop thinking like commercial mariners and start thinking like political actors, because every move now has an audience far beyond the horizon. That is where psychological pressure starts doing more work than the barrels ever could. If the route becomes unreliable, everyone downstream gets nervous. Owners, insurers, crews, brokers, port operators. Nervous systems slow even without a single shot fired. Some analysts call it a chess move, but the real effect is simpler. It forces choices nobody likes. If Caracas does nothing, it looks weak. If it escorts aggressively, it raises the chance of a maritime incident that can justify even harder enforcement. Either way, it burns time and money. And the money is the point. Oil shipments are not just exports. They pay salaries. They fund security forces. They keep loyalists loyal. They buy breathing room. If shipments stall, the pressure does not stay at sea. It pushes inward, into a government that cannot afford delays that last weeks instead of hours. Every interruption becomes a countdown inside Caracas, and the shorter the clock gets, the more aggressive the escort posture becomes on the water. Now the confrontation compresses into geometry. A cutter closes the gap. The tanker holds steady speed. Radio calls begin sounding routine until the escort decides to test the boundary. Not by attacking, but by crowding, sliding closer than necessary, cutting angles that force the cutter to decide whether to hold course or adjust. Because a small adjustment can be framed later as retreat. A small refusal to adjust can be framed as provocation. Either way, the escort is trying to shape the clip. This is where the most dangerous moments happen. Not when someone wants war, but when everyone wants to look firm. A course change that seems harmless on a bridge can look aggressive on a phone video. A warning call can sound professional or threatening depending on who edits it. A close pass becomes a headline. A bump becomes a crisis. And once that crisis narrative forms, both sides get trapped inside it. Because backing down after the cameras decide what happened is politically expensive. So, the smartest move is not louder pressure. It is tighter discipline. Keep speed steady. Keep the wake straight. Keep the radio calm. Record everything. Follow the script. Because the objective is not to win a stunt, and it is not to deliver humiliation. The objective is to complete the stop without creating the kind of incident that forces escalation just to save face. Zoom out and the shadow fleet layer is still running beneath everything. Names change. Flags change. Paperwork shifts. Rendezvous points move. The ocean is enormous, but the playbook is limited, and that limitation is what makes tracking powerful. An escort does not erase the trail. It only changes timing. It changes where the intercept should happen and under what conditions it should be executed. Because now the next contact is not about a single ship. It is about whether this becomes a pattern. And if it becomes a pattern, then the sea becomes a schedule of tests, where one miscalculation by a few yards can force a decision neither side planned to make. 9:03 a.m. By now, this is no longer a single intercept. It is a posture, and postures create reactions. If Caracas starts believing every outbound tanker could be stopped, the instinct is to harden the escort. More presence, tighter spacing, more aggressive positioning. Not because Venezuela wants a naval fight, but because the regime cannot afford to look like it has lost control of its most reliable export pipeline. But the harder the escort becomes, the more fragile the situation gets. The most dangerous moments at sea are rarely planned attacks. They are misunderstandings at close range. A ship turns a little late. A cutter assumes the escort will keep distance. The escort assumes the cutter will yield. A helicopter dips lower than expected. A radio call clips, or is heard as sarcasm instead of instruction. And suddenly you get the kind of moment nobody intended, but everyone has to react to. That is the operational reality behind the headline language. The real struggle is not speeches. It is captains and bridge teams measuring distance in yards, not press releases. It is boarding teams trying to execute a calm, documented intercept, while escort crews try to project power without crossing a line that would trigger consequences they cannot control. And in a sustained pressure campaign, the goal is not to stop every ship. It is to stop enough ships to change behavior. Insurance reacts, crews hesitate, brokers delay, ports slow paperwork. The system begins to throttle itself, and the slower it gets, the more pressure builds inside Caracas. Which is exactly why the Shadow Fleet adapts. Routes get more creative, paperwork gets dirtier, name and flag changes become faster, rendezvous points shift. The moment tracking becomes harder, intercepts risk becoming rushed, and rushed intercepts are where escorts push closer. So the balance becomes everything. Pressure without a spark, enforcement without an incident. Because the next encounter will not be decided by who looks toughest on camera, but by who stays disciplined when the gap closes again. By the time this reaches its final act, the headline is no longer the word blockade. The headline is the pattern. Patterns change behavior. When enough tankers are delayed, diverted, or quietly turned away, the route stops feeling guaranteed. Insurance tightens, crews hesitate, brokers look for safer cargo, and a system that depends on steady exports begins to feel pressure in places that never appear on a radar screen. That is the real leverage here. Not a single seizure. But the message that the ocean is no longer a free pass. Every shipment becomes a calculation. Every escort becomes a test of discipline. Every close approach becomes a moment where one mistake can force consequences neither side actually wants. For Washington, the challenge is holding pressure below the escalation line while still making the route unreliable. For Caracas, the challenge is protecting shipments without turning escorts into the very incident that justifies tighter enforcement. That is why rules of engagement matter more than rhetoric. The side that stays calm, documents everything, and avoids the clip that looks like provocation is the side that keeps control of the story. And the Shadow Fleet does not disappear. It adapts. Names change faster, flags rotate, routes fragment, rendezvous points move. Tracking becomes a campaign, not an event. Each interception teaches the next crew what to avoid, and each delay raises the stakes inside a system already running on thin margins. So the real question is not whether another tanker sails. It is whether this becomes a sustained pressure strategy or a short burst of enforcement that fades once the headlines move on. Because the next encounter will not be decided by force, but by discipline when the gap closes again. If you want the next update before it breaks into something no one can walk back, subscribe now. We will keep the radar on, the analysis clear, and the noise where it belongs.